Now, even though I'm not the most hardcore Souls-like fan in the whole universe, I do like to cover them because I find it quite interesting that even though they generally have the same sort of mechanics, they all come in their own unique flavour, a bit like packets of crisps, and this one that I'm covering today is no exception. It's called Bleak Faith Forsaken. It is a Kickstarter project, but they released some gameplay today, and I thought it looked kind of cool. Or at least, it's done in a style that I haven't seen for a very, very long time. So let's start at the beginning. I'm going to give you as many details on it as I can. Just to be clear, this game isn't out at the moment, but there is a Steam page up. Unfortunately, console people, you won't be seeing a release for this until they get the funds for it. But looking at some of the gameplay footage so far, I think we can all appreciate and enjoy at least the hard work they've put in for the segments that they have given us. So, starting from the top, it is a third-person game. It's a survival horror, and it's set in an RPG-esque universe. So you, as the hero of the day, are what's known as a Forsaken. You're the last frontier of humanity, and basically you go out and you fight the big, mean baddies, these horrific creatures from something called the Omnistructure. And in true tropey fashion, you find yourself stranded far, far away from the outpost that you usually hang around with your mates. And just like any other person stranded in a Dark Souls-esque universe, you either gotta get good or die. Or as they put it, adapt in order to survive. And I gotta say, my personal favourite line that they put down is, "The world won't wait for you though. You must venture into the unknown. Your faith will decide your fate." As if the world is that 5 o'clock bus taking you home, and if you miss it, well, you're just fucked. So in terms of releases, it was actually meant to come out in 2019 Q4 for early access, and then the full release in Q1, between Q1 and Q2 of 2020. Now, I think we can universally blame every single delay in the world on COVID, so I'm presuming that's what's happened, and we haven't seen a game release yet, but we have got some footage. So going back to the whole setting and everything, because I do like the setting of this and the whole way that they've contemplated it. So you are a Forsaken, and the Forsaken are a legion of hunters who basically have to go out and protect the last vestige of humanity. Now, they've promised that there's going to be a really good story to this, and the experiences are going to be amazing. Now, the way they describe it is cyberpunk and dark fantasy, which are two of my favourite things. Now, I wasn't sure how you go about mixing those two things until they did their recent gameplay trailer, which is you fighting a giant cyber dragon. It's kind of like this big metally monstrosity, and I was like, that's how you do it. Pretty cool. So with all this content, great story, there is roughly about 30 hours of content that they have promised. They've also said that there's going to be a really deep class system, and one of my favourite things is a procedurally generated AI system. And the idea being behind this is so that you can do multiple runs and you don't get the same playthrough every time. And I guess this works very similarly to how the director system works in games such as Left 4 Dead and Back 4 Blood. And it always makes me chuckle with these systems because even though you get different enemies at the same location, it doesn't really change the way that the game is played. It doesn't make me go, oh, well, this was a completely different run this time. Now, I'm not going to be unfair and tar every game with the same brush, because apparently the ecosystem on this is very, very different to things that we have seen before. Because in the omni structure of this game, there are different factions, and apparently they can grow and expand, and they'll also change and adapt, setting up this kind of tiered food chain-like ecosystem. And apparently, because of the way that they compete, and sometimes some will get better than others, you'll end up with kind of like an Apex-esque predator system. So you may be facing one faction or another based on how much that they've knocked out the competition and adapted to how you play. And if what I understood from their Kickstarter was correct, the whole ecosystem is constantly evolving. So if you die in one playthrough, it'll have changed when you go back for the second. Additionally, in other kind of RPG elements, there is crafting, there's scavenging, there's also hunting. You get to pick a class, you have to choose and upgrade the stats based on your playstyle, and there are also various augmentations that you can put on your character, and you can also craft different types of gear, which I know is not all revolutionary and not a brand new feature by any means, but I've been recently playing a lot of survival-esque games and RPGs, and when I don't have crafting, or at least some way to kind of make new types of armor, I really do miss it. Now, for those who are interested in engines, as far as I can find, this is actually being built in Unreal 4. And as samey as the colour palette has been on all the videos that I've watched, the game does look graphically very, very impressive. There's a great sense of scale, and the enemies look really cool, and some of the abilities look pretty unique. And they've gave us some teaser hints at some bosses that just look absolutely enormous. It's like this huge worm thing flying around, and you jump onto its back and kind of scale it, I presume, at a later point. Now, even though these guys have produced some good work so far from what we've seen, I am a little bit worried that the project is so big and ambitious they're not going to be able to achieve it all on their own. Or at least we'll end up with a jack-of-all-trades-esque style game where it doesn't really kind of excel in any point whatsoever and just end up being very average. And they have been quite honest with that. They have said that they are a very small team and they don't want to just kind of make lackluster items just because they have fewer staff available to them. Like, for example, they aren't just putting a run-of-the-mill combat system in, they're putting in a whole very unique, fully fleshed combat system that will bring a lot of enjoyability to combat. But hey, I'm all for being proven wrong. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is just their stretch goals. So they've got ones ranging from $50,000 all the way up to $150,000. Now, the fundraising has kind of come to an end now, and I still cannot find how much they've actually raised for this game overall. But the goals were very interesting nonetheless, and you can kind of see how ambitious the project is with, what they're outlining. So, at 50,000, you've got companions, and it says, if you ever feel lonely in the Omni structure, a fully voiced companion with a unique personality based on their character will fill the void. And then they've got base upgrades. Upgrade your base both visually and functionally. Take over the Omni structure. So they were planning to add base building to it as well. There's dismemberment. Now, actually, maybe they have raised this 115,000 goal, because I did read a post that they've actually included this because they had reached this goal. So dismemberment, not simple aesthetic dismemberment. You can lose limbs and you can keep fighting, replace lost limbs with prosthetics, and try not to bleed out. Happy surviving. So that does sound pretty cool. It almost reminds me of the Monty Python Black Knight scene where he gets all his limb chopped off. So we'll have to see how that fleshes out. No pun intended, of course. So at 150,000 they had modular crafting, which is craft weapons and equipment out of hundreds of pieces to create a personalized look on all your equipment. The combinations are endless. And at their biggest stretch goal, which is 200,000, was their PvP duel arena, which is compete against other Forsaken in casual PvP, or try your hand at hardcore. Upon death you lose all your equipment, but if you win you keep everything. Now, personally, that sounds absolutely horrific, but I know there are people who love this sort of thing, so I'm sure that will tickle their fancy somewhat. Anyway, that's as far as I'm going to ramble on this one, but yes, Soulsy fans, I hope you enjoy it. Check it out. Maybe give them support if it's still open, but it's one to get excited about, I think, and I've enjoyed going over this one. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope you're all well, everyone. I will be back with more news and reviews soon. So stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll talk to you all soon.